Okay, now I'm going to talk about forms. And before we get into forms, we need to talk about phrases and how they go together. If you have two phrases next to each other that go logically together, they can either be a period or they can just be simply two phrases. Well, what makes them connect so that they seem like they go together? Well, what happens, it's the cadence that tells you that. So if you look at this little thing here, these two phrases, phrase one, phrase two, the first one ends on a half cadence, and the second one can end on a PAC or IAC. That's what makes them go together. When you have a less conclusive cadence, remember the less conclusive here means it has a leading tone that's unresolved. That's HC, that's half cadence because it stops on 5. Once you hear that unresolved cadence, then you get to the other cadence here and it's resolved. In other words, it has to end conclusively. So less conclusive to more conclusive. That's what makes a period. Otherwise, these are just two phrases. So it's the cadence that makes the difference. So that's what a periodic or a period is two phrases that go together and create some kind of a logical connection. So it isn't even what happens in the melody so much that tells you, it's the cadences. So if we, to make that a little bit more clear here, here's a period or an example of a period. If it ends on an IAC followed by a PAC, notice that IAC is less conclusive. It doesn't meet the 3 criteria for PAC. The 5-1, root position, soprano ends on 1, which I talked about in the last video. That's also a period. So we have a period here and a period here. Well, an example of not a period would be if we had the PAC first and then the half cadence second, because you can see that that's not logical. It doesn't go from less conclusive to more conclusive. Whenever you have this situation with a period, we call that first phrase an antecedent because it comes before, and then a consequent because it comes after. Okay, and again, we're just dealing with two phrase periods. We're going to talk about double periods in just a minute, but that's two phrases. So I'm going to go down here, and this is over on the next page. That was page 154. This is 155 in your book. And here's an example of this little Schubert piece. We have 4 bars, right? And I've told you this before, 4 bars make a phrase. I'm not going to play this for you, but you can see we're in the key of C major, no sharps, no flats. 1, 2, 3, 4. Everything comes to a stop here. Ends on a 5 chord, which is a half cadence. So the first phrase ends on a half cadence. The second phrase, the melody is actually the same, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can see 5, 7, 1, PAC. So we go from a half cadence to a PAC, so less conclusive to more conclusive. This is a period. And one more thing that we look at, and we have to decide, is it a parallel period or a contrasting period? What that means is what happens in the melody. We already know it's a period because the cadences define that. We have to look at what happens to the melody. If the melody sounds the same, it doesn't have to be exactly the same. If it sounds the same, we call it a parallel period. If these two melodies sounded different, we would call it a contrasting period. But you can see that those two do the same. We don't even have to play a recording of it. So that's a 2-phrase period. That's a parallel period.